Hi there, Prairie Plant Girl here. I was at the garden center the other day and I picked up this gorgeous Royal Cascade Clematis. Check out those blooms. See how deep purple they are with that beautiful stamen center? And then look at the back. Can you see the striping on there? It's just gorgeous. So I am excited to find this because I was looking for a vine that I could use to replace a honeysuckle vine that just did not come back this year. And it's never really done well for me in the area it's in. And so I just wanted something that would work a little bit better for that space. The honeysuckle vines don't seem to do super well for me here, and clematis do better. So I thought I would give a clematis a try. This clematis is rated for zones 4 to 8, I believe it was. And technically I'm a zone 3, but I find a lot of plants that are rated for zone 4 can do well in my area. I think they just don't really test a lot of plants down colder than zone 4. So I'm going to give this a shot because it grows just perfect for the space. What is it? 5 to 6.5 feet tall. And this is just going to be on a trellis on my fence. And the other side of the fence is where my neighbor has a walkway, a pathway that they use to access their backyard. So I don't want something that's going to get big and gangly and in their way. I had another clematis in a similar area to that before, and I was constantly trimming it. It was just too big for that space, and I felt like it was always in their way. I was always worried about that. So I think this size will be a much better size, and I think it'll do better in that space. So I need to dig out the honeysuckle vine and then get the clematis in place. And when I do that, when I get the clematis put in its spot there, I'll show you how I do it, because I plant clematis a little bit different than what you would do with most perennials. And it's really good for the clematis. It kind of helps them to survive better, even in cold climates like mine. So let's go over to the space. I'll give you a look at it, and then I need to get that honeysuckle vine pulled out. Just to kind of give you an idea of the space here, this is my patio that we're on now. That's where I was just sitting right there. And where I want to put it is right, so you can kind of see that green there. That's a little kind of decorative birdhouse we made with the kids when they were little. And it's on a trellis, and that's where that honeysuckle vine is. So this is kind of an interesting little spot in the yard because it gets some morning sun and some afternoon sun, but tends to be shaded through kind of the hotter part of the day, I guess. Just move you from a different angle here. So this is kind of leading from the side of my house, kind of into the yard here. This isn't our main entrance, but it's kind of access to garbage bins and that. And so you can see the sun in the late afternoon. This is the west side. So the sun in the late afternoon kind of shines through here, and it'll catch, like, especially anything at the top of the trellis here, but the bottom down here shaded. So you can see I have lots of ferns and hostas and things down in the bottom here, and it looks pretty shady right now, but it does get actually quite a bit of sun in the morning coming from the east over there. Kind of filters through around this ash tree, and does come in here, peek through, and then in the later afternoon, once it gets around the house again better, it'll shine up this trellis. So I think the clematis will do well there. Clematis really like to have lots of sunshine. This one does say sun to part shade, and they like a cooler root system like a lot of perennials do. So I think this will work really well for the clematis there. And I just need to get that honeysuckle vine out. So you can see the honeysuckle vine stems are there, but it's completely dead and crunchy and just needs to be removed. And you can see how my trellis, hopefully you can tell, it's quite a bit away from the fence there. That's the healthiest way to have when you're putting a vine on a fence or a structure of some sort, is to make sure there's space between those so there's airflow behind. And with the slats of the fence too, it also provides some airflow. So I'm going to get to work getting that honeysuckle vine out. I just have a smaller shovel there, my trowel, and I have my gloves, and I actually have a little bit of fertilizer there too that I'll talk about in a minute. I decided to grab some secateurs too, because I'll need to take this honeysuckle off the trellis here. I'm not gonna worry about taking all the stems off or anything. I don't think it was diseased or anything. It just, never really did well here. And I don't think it loved this spot, so take those stems out and then I can just dig it out the bottom. There's a bunch of obedient plant. I actually came in and pulled a bunch back the other day, just trying to verify that there's nothing coming back from the bottom, this honeysuckle, because sometimes it will grow back from the bottom, but there wasn't, so I might even be able to just yank it out of the ground almost, but not quite. I'm not even sure. I don't know if I had the trellis moved over more at one point, because the vine is actually quite a bit of ways from the trellis to the side. Yeah, these roots just don't look super healthy. I think it's just a little bit cold here for this vine. I don't know. We'll see how the clematis does here, but it's definitely dead. So I'll bring you in and show you what I'm going to do to get this clematis planted. So I'm actually going to wind up kind of pulling out. There's some more obedient plant here. And some weeds. I don't know how I wound up with burr in my yard, but I have burr weeds in my yard. I'm just gonna pull stuff back a bit here. Oh, there's a sweet pea trying to grow. I'm gonna try and clear a fairly large space without disturbing the ferns too much. So I like the ferns and I don't want to lose them here. But I want to dig a pretty large hole for the clematis in regards to its roots, and I want to go a little bit deeper. Right now the clematis is buried to this point in the pot, and that's normally where you would take your perennials, trees, shrubs, anything, and you would just cover them to the point that they're in the pot. But I'm actually going to cover it up past the next couple of sets of growth points, and that will just actually help the clematis to do better. So even if it dies back on the stems, it'll come back from the root. I just need to get a hole that's going to be larger than this can. I'll try and go at least twice as wide as the can, and then, like I said, a little bit deeper than the can. So I'll see how deep I can get in here, and that'll get the clematis off to a really good start. Clematis stems are pretty brittle, and they always staple these things in. Oh good, that one came out good. So I'd like to take it out if I can. You need to be careful with them because they can break easily. It's hooked on the fern. Come here, clematis. I just want to set it out of my way if I can without breaking it, so I can use this can for some of the soil here. To work around the base of the trellis here. Okay, so I've got a pretty good sized hole going there in relation to what the clematis is coming out of. And now I just have a mixture here of blood and bone meal, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in the bottom. It's just a couple of handfuls each and work it into the soil. Clematis are very heavy feeders, so giving them that little bit of nutrition in their hole to really charge the soil so that when they're settling in, they can get access to nutrients is a good thing. Now I want to carefully grab this clematis, take it, set it down. And so once everything comes over here, it should be a little deeper. I think I want to go, if I can move it just a bit. I'm just going to dig a little deeper right where it's sitting. There's a lot of clay right here. So they're just a little bit deeper, so it's coming up, should get past those growth points. Unfortunately, they used a grower bag on this plant, so I'm gonna see if I can free some of the roots from that a little bit. These little mesh bags aren't the greatest. And then I've got that blood and bone in there, and I'm just gonna backfill now. Now that I have some of the soil covered over here, now this isn't finished, but I'm going to put some water on to really get those roots nice and soaked and settled down in the ground, and then I'll continue to backfill. So I can see I have some obedient plant roots here. I'm just going to make sure I try and get as much of that out of there, at least right around the base of the clematis, so that it doesn't have that competition right to start. They are quite aggressive. They will eventually make their way back over here, but the longer it takes them, the better. Okay, so I've got it all backfilled. I will water this in again in a minute, but you'll notice I didn't add any special soil or anything. I just used the soil that's here, because that'll help to encourage the roots to move their way out and find their way in through this entire bed. I'm going to come now and I'm going to take these ties off of the stake here, and then I'll need to go grab some of my own ties to help get this onto the new trellis. And I could see there's a stem that got broken here. Like I said, these stems are pretty brittle on clematis, so they can break easily. I'll just snip it off the point where it must have gotten broken and get it out of the way. And I'll get some soft ties. These stems will twine themselves around a small support structure like this, but if you have a trellis made out of something more substantial, like a 2x2 or even a 1x1 board, they can have more trouble getting attached to that, and you might need to just be using ties to tie it on. I've put it up here and just kind of wound it up, but because the wind's gonna blow and move it around and they are brittle, I'm gonna go get some soft ties and just tie it on here temporarily while it's getting itself established and attached to the trellis. So I gave this a good drink while I went to get my bucket of ties here, and you could use anything. You could use some jute twine, you could use these Velcro type ties. You could probably even use these little things for hooking tomato plants and things. But I have some pre-cut pieces of this kind of rubber wrapped wire already in this container here, and I'm just going to grab a couple of those out I reuse these from year to year, so when I take things like my tomatoes down, I'll just save these little pieces. And so I'm just going to take it and wrap it. Where do I want to hook this on? Maybe like this. Let's stretch up to there. And then just a little tie. See if we can encourage it to stay there. I'll do another one over here. So not like tying it tight to the wire of the trellis, giving it some room to move around so we don't break those stems, but just giving it some encouragement. So you can see this one, so I'm going to take this one over here and encourage it to come over in this direction over here. Just putting a tie. Wrapping it around the stem. And all these little bits here should find their way to a spot on the trellis to hold on. So you can kind of see how they want to bend and wrap on. I don't know how well you can see that, but they want to hold on to the trellis, so we'll just get them in that general direction and they'll find their way. Isn't that just gorgeous? Look at that color on there. And then the backs. I just love how it has the stripes on the backs. A lot of times when you plant perennials, they're not going to do a whole lot for that first season, so I don't expect a lot of growth out of this clematis. I will keep it well watered to help the roots settle in. They want to be kind of moist down at the ground, but not wet. They want the ground to drain. And this is pretty clay soil here, but has a gravel base underneath, and the water does seem to drain out from underneath. So it just stays damp without being puddling water. So that'll be really good for this, and clay soil has a lot of good nutrients in it, so that'll also be good because clematis are very heavy feeders. So I gave it that feed right then to help, get its roots established, and I will come in when I'm doing my other fertilizing of my other flowering plants in my pots. I'll come and just put a little water soluble fertilizer on this as well until about August, and then I am going to stop fertilizing anything that's perennial because I want them, even though it's still hot in August, we quickly will go into September. Our first frost is usually around the middle of September, so I want it to be starting to think about settling in and going dormant, and that gives it some time to do that and use up its nutrients and start to go dormant. So that's just how I handle the perennials in my yard. The clematis, like I said, will probably not do a whole lot this year. Perennials tend to sleep in their first year, which just means it's getting its feet established, it's getting its roots settled in the ground and getting established underneath the ground. And then the second year, you'll start to see a little bit more growth. And the third year is usually when you see it leap into growth, and that's when most perennials will really flourish in your yard and become what you expect them to be. So sleep, creep, leap. That's kind of the rule of thumb with perennials, and that's what I expect with this, as long as it does survive in my zone 3 climate. Like I said, it's technically a zone 4, but we'll find out. I will put some mulch over this once the ground freezes to just help encourage it to be, in a cozy spot, and hopefully we'll get it through to another season and see what this plant can really do for me. So this beautiful clematis here, the Royal Cascade clematis, is one that does bloom on old wood. It's pruning class 2 or B, and those are clematis that bloom on old wood and then sporadically through the rest of the year. Being that I'm pushing the limits of this clematis here, planting it a zone lower than it's been tested for and proven for, I could wind up with just having green growth and no flowers in the following years. But I thought it's always worth a try for me. I just bought a small pot. I could have bought one that was twice the size and spent twice the money on it, but because I'm testing it, I did just get a smaller one. But if you're looking for something that's guaranteed to be a little better for a cold climate like zone 3, then looking for a clematis that's in your pruning zone 3 or C, and those are the ones that bloom on new wood, so they'll set their blooms on the new growth in the spring, and then they bloom later in the year. Or pruning class A, I believe, or 1. I believe that one will bloom on both old and new wood. So you would forfeit the early spring blooms from the old wood, but you would still get some blooms later on in the season as it sets some blooms on new wood as well. But pruning class C or 3 is the safest for places with very cold winters. One thing that I can do if I want, especially being that this is a smaller statured clematis, is I could carefully take it off of its trellis in the fall and put it down on the ground and put some mulch over the vine and just protect it that way for the winter instead of having it exposed, especially being on a fence that's open to winds and things here. That would be something that I might consider, is just taking it off that trellis and laying it down gently on the ground and covering it with burlap or old shredded leaves or anything that'll just give it some protection from winter, and let the snow pile on top of it. And that is a good way to help to protect those bloom buds that have been set in the fall. So just some thoughts on this as you're considering which type of clematis is best for you to grow, especially in a cold climate. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing me plant this clematis. Maybe it gave you some inspiration to find somewhere to put a beautiful vining plant in your yard. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.